What's up, everybody? Welcome into the All 22 NFL podcast. We don't have a lot of time today, so we're going to skip the niceties and we're going to jump right into this thing. We had some big news this week about Drake Maye and Spencer Rattler. So we're going to be seeing two rookie quarterbacks entering the NFL picture for the first time. I think it's worth talking about.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of referenced a couple of episodes ago how you were higher on Drake Maye now than you were previously, or during the draft process or during the preseason, because he wasn't playing. Well, now he's about to play. So now what? So what do you think? Where do you land ultimately now on Drake Maye, his long-term prospects overall, right? I don't think anybody's making any declarative judgments or statements or feelings on Drake Maye one way or the other based on how he performs over the next couple of weeks between now and Halloween, right? But overall, I think the most important thing that we always harp on is ensuring a healthy developmental path for a young quarterback. And for most situations, we lean towards that's sitting and kind of taking your time. Others, yeah, if you can get in there and you're in a decent enough situation, go out there and get your reps early on and develop on the field. You were firmly in the camp of the former when it comes to Drake Maye, if we're just going to go there first. So now where do you stand?
Let's give the people a little bit of background. So Drake Maye is currently 22 years old. He started 2 years at North Carolina before coming into the league. In those 2 years, 91.5 grade, 90.8 offensive grade. So we're talking about one of the top prospects at the quarterback position in the last maybe 5 or 6 years. He was seen as like that great deep ball thrower, 11.0 ADOT, average depth of target, 80 big time throws over those 2 years as a starter. But he was he was a little bit prone to making mistakes, and we saw that on film. We saw some things about his structure and the way he went through his progressions that concerned us at times. Right, at times we saw him looking like the best quarterback in the draft, and at other times he looked like this guy's not ready. And I think when we went back, if we go back and think about what we talked about, it was this guy should probably stay in college another year, develop more before he comes into the league and is expected to be a starter, because that's what NFL teams do now, which you referenced, right? Which I'm essentially against, right? I really saw the struggles when he was making his deep throws, right? Like, he is seen as this great deep ball thrower down the sideline. People would reference that, he can hit anybody at any depth, which at times he really can. But at times also, it could be one play he's making the perfect pass, and the next play he's underthrowing the guy by 3 yards and it gets broken up when the guy was open. So I have concerns with how he will develop if he enters the NFL as a quarterback today. Now let's talk about, just really quickly, what the Patriots look like at this point in time. They have the third worst pass blocking unit and the third worst receiving unit. They have the ninth worst defense. And we talked about during the draft that they desperately needed elite talent basically at every important position. Yes, quarterback was one, but they needed at wide receiver, they needed at tackle, they needed at edge rusher, and hopefully they have it at cornerback, right? But the major positions, they really don't have that guy. They lost their defensive interior star for the year already. So that's a concern. Michael Onwenu, who was the guy that was set to leave, they got to come back successfully, which is fantastic. But what we talked about is they needed to find a place for him to call home. In 2024, he's already played 100 snaps or more at 3 different positions: left guard, and right tackle. And his performance has been abysmal. David Andrews, their starting center, has been hurt and out and hasn't been playing. Their backup center has been atrocious. The Texans are an extremely tough matchup this week. They have fantastic edge talent: Daniil Hunter, Will Anderson Jr., great young corners in Stingley and Lassiter. I don't see a way that this turns out good for Drake Maye. I think what's going to happen is they're going to have to rely on his athletic ability, which I didn't touch on, but he's a great runner and he does open things up for an offense because he has the ability to move. And maybe that's all the Patriots coaches were thinking about, is we need to open this thing up more, right? Jacoby Brissett is too much of a statue at this point in his career. He wasn't always, but that's not going to work with the team that we have today. Our chances are best if we have a more mobile quarterback and Drake Maye's big arm that can stretch the field and really open things up. Potentially in the short term, that is going to benefit the Patriots. but how will it affect the long-term development of Drake Maye when he's getting pressured at, unbelievably fast rates, and they don't really have the receivers to get separation and get open, right? So I'm definitely concerned at this point. My flag goes up as, I'm hoping for the best for Drake Maye because he's a prospect I think both of us had as our second favorite quarterback prospect in the draft. But I think we just need to temper our expectations of what we can expect right now. Is this going to be a permanent thing that he's now the starter for the rest of the year? I don't know. I don't think it has to be. But what does it do to his confidence and his development if they now go back and forth with him being the starter, him not being the starter? That's really my concern.
Yeah, I don't think you can pull back at this point anymore. You can't do the Michael Scott snip, snap, snip, snap. And so in looking at the schedule for the Patriots, I understand it's not going anywhere with Brissett. It never was. And after a certain point, it gets stale, and sometimes you have to make some changes. But in looking at their schedule, you mentioned it. The Texans, they have defensive talent, especially at the edge, and then also in the secondary at corner. So it's a tough matchup for a young quarterback. Then you have the Jaguars, where can be hit and miss in spots at times, but their edge pressure, their edge rushers have performed well this season as well. Josh Allen in particular. So then you have the Jets coming to New England October 27th, followed by the Titans, who again have had a pretty stingy defense at times this year as well. So the next 4 games, none of them are particularly easy. Then after that, the schedule lets up a bit where you have the Bears, the Rams, the Dolphins, the Colts, the Cardinals, and then you get into the Bills. Now we're already talking like 3 days before Christmas. So I think this 4-game stretch coming up here is much, much tougher than the next 5-game stretch following that. And so to me, I just think the Patriots came into this with a long-term plan for Drake Maye, and obviously it was with the understanding that the offense was not in a great situation, and you didn't necessarily want to throw a rookie out there in that type of chaos. And now, a month into the season, when that has all proven to be true, I think Timo Risk, if I'm saying his name correctly at PFF, had the perfect tweet about this. Now that your worst fears about the offense were confirmed as it relates to not being helpful to a young quarterback, now you're going to put the young quarterback in the game. You proved yourself right, and now you're going to go ahead and do the thing that you were afraid of doing, which is potentially harming the development of your young quarterback because of the situation around him. If you're going to do that, if you can't start Brissett for the whole year and have, Drake Maye sit there the entire season, then okay, fine. I understand that you want some game reps under his belt and you want to at least have a sense of direction for your team at the end of the season. You want to at least be able to point to something and say you accomplished something to set yourself up for the future. That's great. Do it when the schedule gets a little easier here. Don't have, him staring down the barrel of Will Anderson, Daniil Hunter, Josh Allen, Quinnen Williams, Jeffrey Simmons. Don't have him doing that for the first month of NFL action for your young quarterback. That doesn't help anybody. So that's the negative. The optimism side of this is, I think what we see, and Jaden Daniels is a perfect example of this, is the one thing that definitely translates to football in any setting at this level, and you can jump right into the NFL and do this well, at least if it's a part of your repertoire, is make plays. If you're just a playmaker at quarterback, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to make poor throws. You're going to take sacks you shouldn't, which we've seen from all these young rookie quarterbacks already. But if you're a playmaker, you're going to make plays. It's what Jaden Daniels is doing. It's what Caleb Williams was doing, even when he was performing very poorly early on in the season, Carolina. So I anticipate we'll see that from him. He's going to break the pocket, elude 2 sacks that otherwise would have gotten Brissett to the ground or something, and probably make a chunk play out of it, what otherwise would have been a dead play. So you want to see that, and that's going to translate. But overall, down to down for the next 200 dropbacks of his career, basically, he's going to go up against some really stingy defenses, and that's not what I would have wanted for the start to his career. Am I automatically just downgrading my prospects or projections for his long-term development? No, not yet. But if I see him get battered and bruised, which would not be surprising to anybody, it's a concern that you have to think about. So, there's always that little bit of excitement. We're excited to see him and what he'll do. I expect he'll make a couple big time throws, elude a couple of sacks, make some plays, but you're also going to see some turnover worthy plays. And now it's just a matter of how many hits is he going to take? Is his internal clock going to get scrambled now, because he's going to be facing a lot of pressure, presumably, behind this very poor offensive line, throwing to very poor receivers against very not poor defenses for the next month.
All great points. And I think you touched on one thing, right? Like, I'm not comparing him to Anthony Richardson in most ways, but I think that's what we see in Anthony Richardson, right? This is a guy that has insane big playability, shows that at times, but also shows that he can't hit a very easy throw over the middle or on the outside, right? Like, he misses the easy throws. I think May is a better pure passer than Anthony Richardson. So I think we'll see a slightly elevated level of play from that, with maybe a slightly less elevated, big playability. And again, I think at this point, I'm not selling Drake Maye in any means, right? Like, I think this is still a let's hold and see, and let's believe in what we saw as a prospect, which again, for me and Ray, was prospect 2 at the quarterback position. So be excited you get to see him play, but definitely, limit your expectations, especially against a really talented and hungry Houston defense. Let's go to Spencer Rattler, though, right? This is the other quarterback that's making his first start in the NFL for the New Orleans Saints. 24 years old. He was a 4-year starter in college, 2 years at Oklahoma before Caleb Williams took over, 2 years at South Carolina. And he was honestly amazing in his early career. In 2020, he had a 92.5 PFF grade, 2022, 86.1. And that's when he lost the starting job to Caleb Williams. He then transferred to South Carolina, 64.3 grade in 2022, 77.6 in 2023. And the difference really between those two things, which was pretty eye-opening when you look at the numbers, is what he was asked to be. At Oklahoma, it was more of that playmaker style football that we talk about with Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams, Baker Mayfield type football. When he went to South Carolina, it was more game manager, right? His average depth of target was, I think, seven yards, something like that.
7.5.
7.5. His time to throw was pretty quick. And we also saw his big time throw to turnover worthy plays, right? 2020, he had 32 big time throws, 12 turnover worthy plays. The next year when he got benched, it was 3-8, so not good. He goes to South Carolina and it was 21 big time throws, 22 turnover worthy plays in 2022. And then last year, more of a game manager, only 12 big time throws, 11 turnover worthy plays. So he also offers some of that same athletic ability, right? He can throw the ball from any angle. He has 1,000 career rushing yards, 16 touchdowns. And if you watch him in the preseason, you saw, right? He can make the throws at different angles. He has that big boy play too in him. Like, he can do those things. But I think, when we spoke about him in our projections in the offseason, it was, this is a guy that makes too many mistakes. He essentially is a veteran at this point, being a 4-year starter, 5 years in college, but he still looks like there are parts of his game that are really raw. So is this a pit bull that can't be put on a leash, right? Like, is this going to be a guy that just can't be trained to play in structure the way that in the NFL you'll essentially need to be?
Yeah, that's my thing that I harp on the most, right? Is that it seems like something you can teach, and to some extent it is. But to me, the ability to consistently play in rhythm and with timing is actually an innate natural ability that you either have or don't. And if you don't, you can only build it up to a certain point. And when the bullets start flying and you're in the National Football League against these defenses, that lack of innate ability is going to be exposed. We saw it with Will Levis. We've seen it with countless other quarterbacks. And to me, that is the biggest That's the biggest reason why Spencer Rattler fell, I think, for the most part. That's why because arm talent wise, as far as just being able to throw the football and make plays happen, he has the ability that a lot of other highly drafted quarterbacks have. But it's everything else that isn't up to the standards of those other highly drafted quarterbacks, which is why he was taken later. And given that particular aspect that we're talking about here is that ability within structure and in rhythm, to me it's innate, and I don't anticipate that that's something that can be developed in the NFL to the extent needed to be a consistent starting quarterback. There's always people who buck the trends, and perhaps it was always there, but because of the sort of the inconsistency in situations in college, getting benched for Caleb Williams at Oklahoma, and then a new situation over there in South Carolina, which wasn't fantastic and never really is, because South Carolina, they play in the SEC and it's tough schedule, and they don't typically have the aggregate level of talent of most other teams in that conference. So sure, I guess if you wanted to be optimistic, you could say that he's got a good play caller, and perhaps they can, draw some things up for him that he's comfortable with. And if that ability was always there, perhaps we'll see it. But I would lean towards that not happening. And it's just one of those deals where, he was taken late for a reason. He's a somewhat talented backup quarterback who in spurts can have some success, but over the long term, I don't think is someone you see develop into a long-term starting quarterback or someone who's an option for you in all 22 on sort of any consistent basis as a starter or even a quarterback 2. I think it's a quarterback 3 tops. And so if you're a user on the platform, by all means, I guess it's worth the dart throw. You have 53 spots. You probably have had some players go on IR this past week, right? You probably have some open spots as a result. So if you have an extra spot, you might as well, just because of the value of a quarterback. But I think given his style of play and that lack of consistent play within rhythm and timing, I don't anticipate this is something that'll last for the long term for Spencer Rattler as like a starter here on out, where he just snatches the job and runs with it.
Yeah, I think people need to remember that Derek Carr did not get benched; he got injured, right? And it's not supposed to be an IR stint; it's supposed to be a couple weeks. So temper your expectations. I think a few things I want to note, right? We talked about last episode how the guys that are making these NFL comebacks, like the Justin Fields and the Sam Darnolds and the Baker Mayfields, were all like top picks in NFL drafts that maybe landed with the wrong team. The guys like Gardner Minshew and Drew Lock and Spencer Rattler are the guys that we always hold on hope for, because we like something in their game, but it's very difficult for those guys to hold jobs. It's very, very difficult, right? Because there is something innate about their game, which is why they weren't first round picks or top 15 picks for that matter. So I do think you need to temper the expectations. New Orleans has the second worst pass blocking unit in the NFL, ahead of the Patriots at 3, right? They do have a talented receiver core. I think right now they're top 3 in PFF grading. They have a pretty solid run game, right? Kamara is a stud. And their defense is middle of the road. It's not great. It's not terrible, but they have some pieces there. So, I don't really know what to expect here against a Tampa Bay defense that's pretty strong, always difficult, defensive-minded head coach. Their front seven is always strong. Their defensive back group is playing better than we expected it to. Again, I think it's going to be similar. We're going to see some big plays. We're going to see the arm. We're going to see why people get excited about Spencer Rattler. There's also a chance we see him throw 2 to 3 interceptions in this game. And we're talking about, okay, if New Orleans wants a chance at the playoffs, they really need Derek Carr to come back strong. They need the interior of their offensive line to come back strong. And it's really going to be up to those injuries if they're going to be successful.
Yeah. Antoine Winfield returned to practice Wednesday, so sure, Spencer Rattler's not happy to see that. But you mentioned the opportunity for turnovers. It's going to be there. And so if you're I mean, there was never any decision to make if you have Winfield Jr. on your roster in all 22, but that's absolutely something you're on the lookout for. A vet like that, a savvy vet like that, a defensive oriented coach team there in Tampa against a rookie like this. It's it's an advantageous matchup if you have some Tampa defensive players in your lineup.
Awesome. Well, everybody,
it's worth it. I just want to say again, it's worth the shot in the dark, because on the 3% chance that it's a hit, by all means, you got yourself a quarterback, but yeah, don't count on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're carrying, sixth guards or you're like me and you have Brian Brisset on your bench, right? Like you could cut bait with one of those guys, make the investment at the position that's more important. But everybody, there's a big game tonight, Seattle and 49ers. That's a conference game. I think the winner will be the 1 seed at the moment or something like that. So very important matchup there. Definitely tune into that. But thank you all for tuning in today. If you haven't yet, please give us a follow on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and Twitter at all22_PFF, and give us a review wherever you watch or listen to your podcasts, and have a great day.
Let's go.